How's it going? This is the
good.
right side.
I need more.
We should swap.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
This is left wing,
No,
right
this
wing.
is good. This is
that
good.
only
This is
makes
good.
sense, right? Oh, it's left for you guys. That's true.
We're off
I
to a
only see
great
things from
start.
my eyes. That's
2
true.
plus 2 equals 4.
I need a new suit. I was 20 pounds lighter before the mission, but what's going on? Hey.
How's it going? Do we want to? So yeah, it's about left wing violence versus right wing violence.
Yes. I want to say, what an anti-Semitic debate that last
Yeah,
one
that was fucked.
That
Hey,
was crazy.
If you start blaming the Jews, I'm leaving. By the way, like that's fucked. That was fucked. But yeah, I do want to start out the debate. I just want to throw out a number real quick. It was kind of crazy. I was doing a lot of prep for the debate, and one of the numbers that came up the most was, or that interested me the most, was that 4% of Americans are encourage violence or are okay with political violence. But if you ask Democrats, they think that 40% of Republicans think that. And if you ask Republicans, they think 40% of Democrats think that. So I do think it's notable that, like, honestly, in this crowd, we're all fucking cool with debate. We want to have conversations. We don't want to lead to any sort of violence or anything like that. And I think that that's a little bit bipartisan. So I just
agree.
want to be like, I want to appreciate that most people don't think this shit. But we are talking about violence here. Yeah. You want to start?
Yeah, well, I'll do kind of my opening statement. I do want to thank you. You know, you shook my hand. Most of the people here have, whether they're here for me or for you or whatever. I really appreciate that. It is nice, and I'm seeing people that I, came up with on political TikTok. And, unfortunately, Soypill was not willing to shake my hand, and I don't think that does anything to improve the political relations of anybody here. But I will say you're obviously familiar with the same statistics, and I'm sure we'll get into the statistics in this, body of research. They suck. All of the, there's a ton of methodological flaws, both on the right and the left, when trying to kind of figure out what the perspectives are about violence. And so I think it's actually important to look at trends. But I will say, because you've seen the same data, that there is this kind of gradient that exists regarding very progressive people and the way that they feel concerning, and this is the particular language, right, of some of these studies, punching Nazis. I think that's where the conversation has to take place. It's about the language we use.
That's fine. I'm happy to. So I will say, and I hope that you'll concede it, the vast majority of studies do say that, like, the ratio between left to right wing violence is about 10 to 1.
So
we can skip the studies as long as you can see that's what the studies say, and then we can go to rhetoric. I'm fine with that.
I'm going to frame, I'm almost willing to concede it, but it's like 10 of my friends say that they agree with me. It's like you have to look at every single one of these studies. I don't want to bore the audience, but there are studies that are absolutely flawed in their methodology. There's studies that include domestic violence committed by people who at one time had right-wing associations. Many of these studies don't even include property destruction. They don't include the burning of Teslas around the country. Every single one of these studies has methodological flaws or is working with a sample size that has been cooked too small to be statistically significant.
So wait, hold on. To be clear, I want to take that step by step. First off, a sample size doesn't include in this because we're not polling people. We're looking at lethalities, which you don't need a sample size for. We're just looking at which specific incidences there were. And wait, hold on real quick.
Okay.
I do agree that the stats that I'm using are ignoring things like arson and property damage. I concede that for sure. But I think when it comes to actual murders, which I think is what we're talking about here when we're talking about violence, right-wing...
I disagree. I disagree with your frame.
Okay, well then here's what I'll say. I'll concede that left-wing people tend to burn more buildings, but right-wing people tend to murder people, and that to me feels more egregious. And if we want to have conversations about burning down buildings, we shouldn't be doing that. I agree with that. But I would so much rather rather be talking to a left-wing person who burns down a building than a right-wing person who thinks it's okay to murder people.
Yeah, well, I think, again, this goes to the way that we're assembling this data. Obviously, we know that there are left-wing people who are okay with murdering people, or at the very least are okay dismissing or tolerating it. And the use of the language, and I get this a lot because I'm LDS, right? The typical retort is like, oh, it was really sad what happened in Grand Blanche, Michigan, but we should remember that Mormons aren't Christians. This is what the left does with political violence, like around Charlie Kirk. This is what happened. Well, it's really bad that it happened, but what that is an effort to strip you of your human empathy. And if I'm not in a support of red flag laws, but if you want to talk about something that is a red flag, it is a lack of empathy for suffering and loss. I'm not here to police everybody and say, you can't make jokes about Charlie Kirk. I've made jokes about Charlie Kirk. I sing the song, You've All Got the Lighters, which suspiciously has 2 lightning bolts on it. I don't know what the dog whistle was there. I thought this was a left-wing event. But I do believe that there's more desensitization or tolerance of violence. Like, look even back to Richard Spencer. How many people do you know that condemned the punching of Richard Spencer? That's a clip.
Hold on. First off.
Yeah.
We should be really, really careful about what's, because I would love to talk about rhetoric.
Yes.
I do think every incident that you're looking at are losers online and not political candidates, not the people.
Why does that matter?
Why does that matter?
Which political candidate
hold on.
committed the murders?
Which political candidate endorses or doesn't condemn the murders?
Hold on.
Wait.
Which one doesn't? Which one doesn't?
Can I say that? Can I say this?
Yes. Which one doesn't?
Wait, neither of them do. Which political candidate murdered people? Obviously,
No. I'm not talking about the murders now. Which one condemns it?
Which one condemns it?
Which political candidate is condemning the violence? Like which right wing to frame it?
Democratic lawmaker, but not Donald Trump. That's my point.
That's incorrect.
Hold on.
That's incorrect.
Hold on. I'm going to give some examples.
Okay.
So first off, Cesar Sayoc. I don't know if you guys know who this is. He was a Trump supporter in 2017 who mailed 16 pipe bombs to his supporters. And when asked about it, Donald Trump said, "There's no blame. I don't blame myself. I don't blame anyone else." And to me, I find that abhorrent. I don't think that that's okay for our lawmakers to be making statements like that. Now, you will point to people who are maybe even in this audience, maybe people that we know, who are endorsing or making light of Charlie's murder, but you won't find that from Democratic lawmakers, but I will find that from the President of the United States, and I think that difference is pretty stark.
So I think it's interesting, but with the case of the President of the United States, if we're both going to address the arguments that neither has made, which I think is okay, it shows that we're both thinking about each other's arguments, and I like that. The President of the United States, in the thing that is often referenced by leftists to be the most violent case of right-wing extremism in recent history, the January 6th protests, the President, not a week later, is coming out saying that it was abhorrent, that he condemns it outright, that violence had no place in public policy. And look, there were pardons. There were presidential pardons
towards those violent extremists.
You're correct.
Towards 600. Hold on. 600 people who were convicted of assault of a cop.
And
were pardoned by Donald Trump.
And you know what's interesting? Even all of the pardons that Trump has done to date do not reach half of those done by President Biden, which are 4,000 in number.
But not violent offenders.
How do you know? Have you looked at every case of the 4,000?
Hold on. First off. Because you talked about Trump's rhetoric around January 6th, and you're saying he's condemning it.
He condemned it outright.
Now,
yes,
I do agree that you can pull specific clips where he is condemning what happened on January 6th, but we also find clips of him saying, "I don't fucking care if they have guns.
Well,
they're not here to shoot me."
Let's not say the F word, but I appreciate it.
Okay.
I'm in the wrong tour for this, I know, but...
Okay, yeah. Well, sorry, that was the President of the United States. He did say the F word, so I think it's okay to quote the President.
That's one of the worst things he's done.
Say the F word?
Yeah.
Wow.
There are several, but it's up there.
All right. So, look, Donald Trump was on record.
Yes.
A journalist was there to document him saying, "I don't care. I don't effing care that they have guns. They're not here to shoot me." Now, yes, he also condemns the violence once people start rallying against him and say, "Hey, you got to condemn what happened." But I want a president, and I expect from a president, to be 100% peaceful, not just 75, 50, wherever the percentage may be.
I mean, look, if the standard is that the politicians are only condemning violence once people start pressuring them to do it, when are we going to get after Barack Obama? When are we going to get after events that eventually lead to the shooting of congressmen in baseball fields? When are we going to get to the fact that $2 billion of property damage are caused because of rhetoric regarding systemic racism in this country?
Okay,
and when are we going to get to the fact that calling a person a fascist is actually absolutely going to enable people who think that punching a Nazi is okay?
Okay, wait, hold on. You said a lot of things. I want to break them down slowly.
Okay.
First off, the shooting of the baseball field, right?
Yes.
You're talking about the Bernie Sanders supporter.
Yes.
The next day, Bernie Sanders said, "I do not support this man. I am so sorry that happened. If any of you guys are in my field, I want you guys out. We support peace here."
That sounds like what Trump said. You're just not admitting that a politician...
Hold on.
Okay.
The next day after Paul Pelosi was hammered to death, he joked about it, and his son is saying, "This is my next Halloween costume," and it was underwear and a hammer. Now, I want to condemn the people who were Charlie Kirk for Halloween and had blood and thought that was funny. That's fucked.
Based.
That's gross.
Well, F word again,
That's
but
gross.
based.
Sorry, that's effed.
That's
effed. Is that okay?
And look,
no, wait, hold on.
That's okay. That's
but
okay.
we should also be looking at the son of the president and the president himself, who joke about this same incident when it's the husband of Nancy Pelosi. I don't find that okay, and it was one of his supporters. And I think, by the way, when one of the most the biggest things that we talk about when it comes to violence, the way to the way to prevent violence is by condemning it, because we don't want the person to feel like a hero, and we want to make sure that everyone else is able to rally and work with law enforcement, and that can't happen if the top-down structure refuses to condemn the violence.
I could agree to some extent with that. Like, I personally think that, comments either made about Rob Schneider or other, I do think those are inappropriate. And I think, maybe not all the Republicans here agree with me, but I think there does have to be, less cruelty in the way that we exercise our political opinions. And we do see that, unfortunately, with the way that some of, the ICE raids are done. I think, yes, the American people, they sent their mandate. They want ICE raids. They want deportations. But I don't think people want to see it. And I think oftentimes the Trump presidency or the admin is doing things in a way that is not conducive to, actually achieving what they want and actually encourages the left. That being said, the left is absolutely being encouraged. They are fighting off the very police that you're talking about. And if we're looking at, who is maybe more dismissive of violence, or if the right or the left is more violent, the right is absolutely taking a law and order type approach. And you might disagree. You might say that, well, Trump pardoned a bunch of criminals. Joseph Biden literally pardoned 2 times as many, either commutations or pardons during his last presidency.
You have to look at what specifically he pardoned. Now, a huge, I would say the plurality.
Are you willing to go out and defend the 4,000 pardons and commutations?
No, I'll defend the plurality of them, though. And the plurality of those pardons were drug offenders, were federal marijuana users or distributors. Now, I don't think that they should be. I think that it's fine to pardon those people and say, look, it's pot, okay? It's pot. We could chill a little bit. Okay. Now, I think there's a difference between that and someone like Ross Ulbricht, who Donald Trump Trump pardoned, who was the leader of the biggest black market in America and was convicted for 40 years because of smuggling children and smuggling dark, really Schedule 3 drugs. I forgot the schedule.
Well,
whatever
if it's
the highest
marijuana
one
now,
is.
it is Schedule 3, and I think that's a problem.
Whatever the highest
but if
one
you want
is.
to go after, the marijuana uses, maybe you're on Trump's side regarding the reclassification of marijuana. Maybe you come off as the Trump supporter.
Sorry, there are some things that Trump does that are okay. Yeah, for sure. When it comes to
for me, there are some things that Trump does that are not okay. But I think it is ridiculous, this framing that, look, I know the name of this individual who was a non-violent drug offender that was pardoned by President Biden.
Yeah.
I can defend the plurality of the January 6th protesters, not every single case, obviously.
600 out of those 2,000 were convicted of assault of a police officer.
I think that there is obviously something that needs to be analyzed in every single one of those cases, and unfortunately, and I'll concede this, I don't have the time to look over every single case, but I'm also not naive enough to believe that this was not an extraordinary event that had an extraordinary amount of prosecutorial pressure, because it was an attempt to make an example out of something, and that, in my opinion, is not the way our justice system is supposed to work.
To me, I think that storming a political capital and assaulting law enforcement does need some punishment, and I'm happy to hear that you're a little bit more soft on crime than I am. I think that's a totally acceptable position.
Unless they sell drugs, then it's worse.
Sorry, unless they sell pot. Can we be?
Pot is the #1 gateway drug.
Oh my God!
It absolutely
is. You're not going to get the crowd on this one. The vast majority of people.
I'll get any of them that aren't smoked out, that haven't been smoking that sticky green stuff.
We could chill a little bit. We could do a little slap on the wrist. But the idea that people were in federal prison for marijuana charges, that's what you're comparing against the January 6th protesters, is insane.
No, I think. Look, let's get back to kind of the idea of the debate, right? And again, this is not, a referendum on Trump's January 6th policy, although I think it is important to mention that he, like every single politician, when they are pushed to condemn the violence, like mass violence that occurred, he did condemn it. And I don't think that's something that's mentioned oftentimes by leftists. But the posturing of these parties, the rhetoric that has occurred, I don't think you can divorce the results that we've seen in recent years, either against, what do you think has led to the attacks on ICE? on Border Patrol.
Sure.
What do you think has led to those attacks?
No, of course. Well, I would say what leads to those attacks, and I'm not condoning those attacks, by the way, but what leads to the attacks is the infringement of due process, and also the consistent grabbing of U.S. citizens. The New Yorker did a piece where they went into an ICE facility and they found 170 U.S. citizens there. Now, I think that's fucked, and I think most people. Oh, sorry,
again.
I'm sorry, Kai. I'm trying to work with you. I'm trying to work with you.
I appreciate it.
That is effed. That is messed up.
Let's go.
Okay.
That is fetched up.
I grew up around Mormons. I grew up Mormon myself. I get
Let's go.
My mom's the same way. She's she's on your side during this debate.
Let's go. We love you, Mom.
Yeah, sorry. That's what was I saying was messed up?
We're talking a little bit about the rhetoric, right? And I want you to address that point. The rhetoric surrounding punching Nazis.
I agree. I think that's messed up.
Okay, here's the problem. In this debate, and in many of these debates, and it's happened a lot in Jubilee debates, the left never needs to stake a claim. The left can say, well, I actually don't support Joseph Biden, pardoning his son, or I don't support all of his presidential pardons, but you, as a Trump supporter, have to support all of the presidential pardons of the right.
Sorry, where is Biden's rhetoric ever been conducive to punching Nazis? Find one time where he said we should punch Nazis.
Okay, hold on. There's a conflation.
But wait. I could point out that Donald Trump has said, knock the crap out of him to protesters at his rally. And then he said, I'll pay the legal fines for those who do. And I feel like that rhetoric is different.
Okay, here's the problem. There's an obfuscation of the guilt, and there's this minimization of and a complete removing of context. Why is it, do you think, that and because it is true, right-wing people have referred to their political adversaries as being like the Nazis or being like Hitler. Why do you think it is that right-wing people never punch Nazis?
Why is it? Wait, sorry. Say that one.
If being a Nazi is such a bad thing, when a right-winger calls a leftist a Nazi, why is there not an influx of violence against the supposed Nazis? It's because people implicitly understand what is being said by the politician is, it carries a weight that is also perceived culturally. In this sense, there is a cultural perception of right-wingers as Nazis and fascists that simply does not occur on the left. In that same way, when Trump says to his...
Hold on.
I'm responding to your point, real quick.
Donald Trump has called multiple people fascists.
This is the point I'm proving.
Okay, go ahead.
Has anybody ever punched somebody because Donald Trump told them that they were a fascist?
No, but Caesar Sayok
because
mailed
nobody believes
16
it.
pipe bombs because of it.
Where? At
Sorry?
the RNC and the DNC.
What?
At both the RNC and DNC.
No, it was not. It was towards Nancy Pelosi, a number of journalists that were critical of
Wait, hold on. Which
Trump.
case are you talking about?
Caesar Sayok.
When?
2017, I want to say. 2018, maybe?
Okay, I'm thinking about the January 6th pipe bombs. I'm thinking about a different deal.
Okay,
because I was going to say the motives of that individual, they're very much more up in the air. Bombs were supplied to both sides, right? But look, it's like these situations, I think it's baffling. You just can't think of an example, and I don't even conceive of it because it's so ridiculous that somebody who's being told that the Democrats are the real fascists are going out and punching Democrats like Hassan Piker or somebody because they're the real Nazis. Nobody buys that.
Hold on. We got to break this down a little bit slowly.
Okay.
First off, I don't think it's conducive at all to say that we should punch Nazis.
I agree.
I do think
because it happens.
Personally, I think that Donald Trump's a fascist and a lot of his Trump supporters are fascists, but I believe in debate. I believe in conversation, and I don't think that we should punch fascists, even though I do believe that they believe in some fascist ideologies. Wait, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
So I condemn all of those people who say that we should respond in violence. I don't think that that's the answer. I think that it ruins what a democracy is built on. It ruins what America's built on.
Here's the problem is you're saying that Donald Trump is a fascist to a group of 40% of strong progressives who believe it is okay to punch fascists and Nazis.
Sorry, 4%, not 40, 4%.
No, hold on. It's you have to look at these different studies.
Sorry,
they're different studies.
Nazis? Okay,
to
sure.
punch Nazis.
Sure.
I'm not talking about violent extremism. I'm speaking specifically about your terminology.
Wait, so then a real question. If you let's say how am I supposed to act when the Trump administration is doing things that are a little fascistic to call them fascist, but also not engage in violence? How do I walk that line? Because if you have a better answer, I'd love to walk that line. I will condemn anyone who thinks that it's okay to punch Nazis, anyone who thinks it's okay to commit violence, but I also don't know how to say, well, this person is a fascist. He is enabling the Supreme Court to give him immunity on total immunity. I find, like, what else should I be calling that? How else can I engage in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's very difficult to dismantle it because this perception has been built up by the media, by Hollywood, by politicians, by plenty of people over decades. This is something that goes all the way back to the aftermath of World War II, where you have perspectives, either, you know, the tenets of fascism that are supported by Umberto Eco, or the ones that are outlined in Secular Humanism, the magazine, the 14 tenets of fascism, which very frequently concern things that are just simply right-wing in their nature. Things like a traditional mentality towards gender roles. Things like the idea that the state does not need to be libertarian. All of these things begin finding themselves as part of an authoritarian personality. The exact thing that is being deemed a gateway to violent extremism by becoming Nazism. And it is a way of dismantling the right wing. I think that's the problem.
That's a thing that I think you really need it's a hard conversation to be had, because you're like, Umberto Eco's, his 14 tenets of fascism, it does outline some conservative values in there, for sure. Now, here's the thing. Maybe we should be, I don't know how else to acknowledge that maybe some conservatism does lead to fascism. That unfortunately these two ideologies are inherently tied to each other. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a conservative to be a fascist, or you have to be a fascist to be a conservative.
I think the problem is...
All right. Okay, guys, that is time. That was a fucking great debate. All right, guys. We have another debate coming up, and this one on the Republican side, we have Sarah Stock, who's going to be debating on the
Being said, the left is absolutely being encouraged. They are fighting off the very police that you're talking about. And if we're looking at, who is maybe more dismissive of violence, or if the right or the left is more violent, the right is absolutely taking a law and order type approach. And you might disagree. You might say that, well, Trump pardoned a bunch of criminals. Joseph Biden literally pardoned 2 times as many either commutations or pardons during his last presidency.
You have to look at what specifically he pardoned. Now, a huge, I would say the plurality.
Are you willing to go out and defend the 4,000 pardons and commutations?
No, I'll defend the plurality of them, though. And the plurality of those pardons were drug offenders, were federal marijuana users or distributors. Now, I don't think that they should be. I think that it's fine to pardon those people and say, look, it's pot, okay? It's pot. We could chill a little bit. Okay. Now, I think there's a difference between that and someone like Ross Ulbricht, who Donald Trump Trump pardoned, who was the leader of the biggest black market in America and was convicted for 40 years because of smuggling children.
I can defend the plurality of the January 6th protesters, not every single case, obviously.
600 out of those 2,000 were convicted of assault of a police officer.
I think that there is obviously something that needs to be analyzed in every single one of those cases, and unfortunately, and I'll concede this, I don't have the time to look over every single case, but I'm also not naive enough to believe that this was not an extraordinary event that had an extraordinary amount of prosecutorial pressure, because it was an attempt to make an example out of something, and that, in my opinion, is not the way our justice system is supposed to work.
To me, I think that storming a political capital and assaulting law enforcement does need some punishment, and I'm happy to hear that you're a little bit more soft on crime than I am. I think that's a totally acceptable position.
Unless they sell drugs, then it's worse.
Sorry, unless they sell pot. Can we be?
Pot is the #1 gateway drug.
Oh my God.
It absolutely